Welcome to the show. Today, we're going to talk about the French because the French right now are absolutely crashing out, and they're crashing out over reforms and they're crashing out over their state pension. Now, we talk about the state pension in the UK quite extensively here on this channel, and this is the reason why I want to make this video and have this conversation because I feel like where the French are right now is potentially where we end up in the UK if we do not sort our problems out quickly. Now, this is the headline that was published 4 days ago that I want to go through. And it basically says here why the golden age of retirement is over for French workers. And this article goes into a lot of detail. And in it, you're going to be able to, as we go along with this conversation, start to pinpoint similarities, commonalities with their system and our system, and how, in a very, very weird way, it's like holding up a mirror to us saying, this is where you could end up if you don't get your stuff sorted out. But before we get started with this article, if you are just finding me for the first time, welcome. I love to have you here. If you've not subscribed and you enjoy this video, you get value from it, you think it's educational, informational, all of that good stuff, consider subscribing and also hit that notification bell. It just means that you're going to get notified when I upload another video like this and we have a conversation that hopefully will empower you information that can help you make better financial decisions. Also, don't forget to hit that like button. It's just a nod to the YouTube algorithm to say that you enjoyed the video, and that means it also gets pushed out to other people who may need to see it, who could benefit from this video as well. All right, so let's just jump straight into the article. So it says here, the country lurches into crisis as every attempt to reform throws it into head-on conflict. Now, this right here, I've seen in my comment section a number of times people say, look, we need to be like the French and just protest and not take any of this stuff lying down. But I think that when it comes to reforms, we're actively in this space right now where the government is trying to reform things. Unfortunately for Labour, the last welfare reform bill that they tried to pass through Parliament just did not go through because I don't think anyone was expected the cuts to be as deep as they were. And a lot of the stuff they've U-turned on anyway right now, but that doesn't negate the fact that we're still in this situation where it's difficult to navigate, and they definitely need to decide what's going to be best for the country moving forward, albeit that means they're going to upset people. But on the state pension specifically, like I said, you're going to start to see parallels, commonalities between the UK and France. So let's just go down here. It says here, for decades, the French have enjoyed an enviable retirement. Many leave the workforce relatively young at age 62 and benefit from one of the most generous pension schemes in Europe. But this golden age of retirement is now coming to an end. Last week, the crisis in France deepened following a vote of no confidence in the Prime Minister, forcing him to resign and dashing hopes of reducing the country's huge deficit. And on Thursday, strikes and protests have paralyzed cities across the countries as workers take to the streets over budget cuts and pension reforms. Very, very interesting. I think in that last kind of like paragraph right there, you can see automatically that there are definite commonalities between us and them right now. Now, it says here, it blamed the decline of France on France's high debt and high unemployment and high tax burden. And this is just referring to this statement right here, where there is an index that basically measures where countries sit on retirement kind of like living. And France, unfortunately, have fallen quite a bit to 27th in the 44 countries that are in this index. But it also says here, and this is the bit that I read and I was like, wow. And let me know whether this is a surprise to you in the comment section. Get this. Currently, on average, over 65s in France have higher income than those of working age. That is crazy to me. On average, over 65s in France have higher incomes than those of working age. And if you think about that, you then have to question how, what's the minimum wage? What are the living conditions? And again, this is looking at averages, right? So it's not taking the extremes of those people who are uber wealthy and those people who are super on the breadline, right? This is on average. But the average picture oftentimes is very, very telling in terms of the general sentiment in the population, which is no surprise as to why they're rioting, right? Because if that's what the situation is for the average person on the street, then obviously there's going to be unrest. Now, interestingly, they talk a little bit about how their state pension works in France. And again, you're going to see the commonalities here. The country operates a pay it forward model where younger workers pay in real time for the pensioners. For the pensions of retirees. I can't read today. In return, they hope to be recompensed by a comfortable and relatively long retirement when they eventually stop working. Now, this is very, very similar, if not absolutely identical, to the way the state pension is currently run in the UK. The working force right now in the UK paying income tax and mainly national insurance contributions are basically providing the state pension to those people who are currently in receipt of state pension right now. So in France, it's very much the same system. But it says here, but an aging population has put this model under threat. Today, 1 in 5 people in France are over 65. Taxpayer contributions are insufficient to cover the costs, pushing the retirement system into the red. Pensions now account for 1/4 of government spending compared to a fifth in the UK. Now, this is the big topic of conversation because when you look at, and this goes down to demographics, right? And what the country looks like, not just now, but 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now, to be able to gauge the sustainability of the state pension. Now, in the UK, in France, they're saying here that 1 in 5 people in France is currently over 65. Now, when you look at the numbers, and I'm just going to share another screen with you here, actually, if I can do this, because I was looking at a comparison between the UK and France. And here's just a little bit of a look for you. So currently in the UK, we have 13.1 state pensioners. 13.1 million state pensioners. I believe 8 million of those are on the old state pension, with the remaining being on the new state pension, which basically pays a little bit more. Now, it talks about numbers of workers and contributors to funding their pensions. Now, in the UK, 32.6 million people in employment are aged currently between 16 and 64. In France, it's 30.9. Now, when you think about the ratios, and this is the important bit, right? The ratios. So, worker to retiree ratio, because this speaks to how many people you need to have in the workforce to be able to pay the state pension to keep that sustainable. In the UK, it's in the France, sorry, it's less than 1.8 workers per retiree. And this is data from 2023. So we've still got 2024 to come in. I would imagine, let's just say it remains stagnant in France. That is a huge, huge problem. And it's saying here that it's projected to fall to 1.5. So 1.5 times workers for every retiree. So it's almost 1 for 1 by 2040. That right there is problematic because you cannot have a functioning state pension if you don't have enough workers paying the tax to fund the 1 in 5 in France, currently 65, receiving the state pension. Now, in the UK, our situation is perilous because currently, according to 2025 data, ours is 2.5 workers per retiree. And that, my friends, is not sustainable, which is why we're having so many conversations about the state pension right now and things like the triple lock, so on and so forth. Now, it's very, very interesting because when you go back to this article, it actually just shows you what's happening in terms of this conversation about shifting the retirement, the state pension age, right? We know that we're having a review of that right now in the UK. It's actually been brought forward because ultimately this is going to be a huge issue for the government. But when you look at this graph right here, what you're basically seeing here is the current state pension age, and then you're seeing the future state pension age, right? So in France, it's currently 62. They are projecting theirs to be 64. Now, when you look at other countries that are comparable to France, so you've got Germany, Spain, the UK, Denmark, Italy, the US, Canada. I mean, Jesus Christ, they are way, way behind. I mean, they're looking to push it to 64 and they're getting backlash right now. Whereas in Germany, they're looking at 67. Spain's looking at 67. The UK, we're looking at 67. In Denmark, 70. In Italy, 71. In the US, also 67. In Canada, 65. The French are way behind the curve when it comes to moving their state pension age. And I would imagine part of their reforms, and I don't know for sure, part of their reforms would be about cutting down the welfare bill, but also perhaps moving this a little bit forward a bit sooner. But that's not going down too well. They're crashing out right now. And I think ultimately, and I got to read this next bit to you, right? Because this is crazy in terms of how the state pension in France actually works. In France, the state pension averages around £1,265 a month, but it can allow workers to take a maximum of 50% of their wages based on their highest earning years, up to a limit of £1,695 a month, or £20,304 a year. And bearing in mind, these pensions are automatically increased with inflation as well. And they will have private pension schemes in the background that they would have invested in as well. Now, look, we can see the similarities here, but I think this is going to be a huge issue and will be very, very concerning. And when you look at their debt versus GDP ratios in France, it's worse than ours. I believe ours is maybe something like 104% or something like that. In France, it's much, much worse. So when we have this conversation about the stability, sustainability of the state pension here in the UK, the French are the case study. They are the case study of what could potentially happen in the UK if we don't start to get these things right now. And we are relying on the government to be able to do this. Now, what are the choices that are available to the government? You know, there's a lot of talk about increasing taxes, which I think we're going to see in the autumn statement. I don't think that is necessarily going to change or solve the problem necessarily. I think what we have is a lot of inefficiencies in our system, which we've spoken about before. I mean, I made a video last week where we talked about, councils paying £20 million, to consultants to find out how they can save money on things that they probably already knew that they had to cut on anyway. Inefficiencies are killing us. Will raising taxes solve that? Absolutely not. I think what we need, though, is we need to fix the economy so that we can have more working people and jobs that pay a good wage for people to go into. That will then increase the tax revenue without there being a tax increase on its own. I think that we need to address this idea that we have a welfare system that is just way too easy for people to take advantage of right now. We've got 6.5 million people unemployed right now, some of which could be working. And that isn't to say that those who aren't working aren't justifiably classed as not working. But I think there is definitely an acknowledgement that we have people in the benefit system right now who could work but choose not to. I think that absolutely needs to be fixed. I think as a society, we have generally just a philosophy. How do I say this word? Um, we have a problem with our philosophy. Let's put it that way. All right. Around hard work, around whether or not it's actually worth it anymore. We talk about this a lot on the channel. For younger people these days, generation rent, what's the point in working hard if you can't afford to buy your own home, if you can't afford to raise children, to have a family because things are so, so tight? I'm seeing this more and more in the comment section on Instagram and here on YouTube, where I see the younger generation just giving up. They can't be bothered. And I think that is dangerous. We need hope in our country. We need a system that instills hope, that instills this idea that it is still possible to work hard and to make something of yourself. And I feel like until we have that happen, we are going to stay on the path to potentially becoming a France at some stage in the future. Because the truth is this, the state pension is wholly unsustainable. It's not even close. So you're going to have to push the state pension age to 71 relatively quickly, which is going to make people more disgruntled that they have to work longer, especially the generation rent, who at some point in the future will probably come to the conclusion that the state pension is not going to be there for them. And why should they even bother if they're not going to be able to access till 71 if it moves to 71, bearing in mind that it might even move even further out by the time they get to retirement? It may not even be there for them at all. We have huge, huge issues to confront as a nation. And I feel like this is going to be wholly dependent on our political system, our political class, to actually have these conversations like we're adults. I don't know whether you agree or not, but let me know in the comment section down below. But I found this really, really fascinating. There is so much more in that article that I could go through, but I just don't want to just, go through the entire thing for the sake of time. What I'm going to do is I will link it in the description. Go check it out. It is very, very, very interesting a read indeed. But thank you so much for watching. I will see you tomorrow. Have a good day, whatever it is you're doing. Cheers.